There are many characters in Jujutsu Kaisen that could exemplify the idea of wasted potential, as in a series like this, mindset, talent, and circumstance are three of the main factors that can allow someone to reach the heights of their abilities. And when thinking about JJK characters with loads of potential, I bet that Nanami isn't the first character that comes to mind, especially if you're a manga reader and know how crazy the levels of strength get as the story progresses. But in this video, I'll be continuing the full potential series and talk about just how strong Nanami could be by breaking free from the limitations of his own mind. Just as I have with other characters in this same series, today I want to take a look at Nanami's moveset and see what could be done to unleash all of his potential. Now, unlike someone like Geto, Nanami's potential definitely isn't as apparent, nor is his starting strength impressive enough to put him besides the likes of special grade sorcerers. Many people even blatantly think that Nanami couldn't have gotten any stronger, and while I initially agreed with this sentiment, when thinking about the story, the power system, and all of Nanami's flaws as a sorcerer, a trajectory for improvement became something that I could visualize. As a grade 1, it's clear that Nanami's competency as a sorcerer is well above average, and Gojo has enough trust in him to take Yuji under his wing. And while Nanami isn't the strongest character in the series by any means, his first fight with Mahito does lend to the idea that he is rather strong. Being able to go toe-to-toe with a special grade like him, even if only temporarily, does speak to his ability. As I'm sure you all know, Nanami's innate curse technique is ratio, which allows him to divide a physical object into 10 segments, and by striking along the 7:3 ratio, he can force a weak point and cleave through opponents even if they are stronger and more durable than him in the conventional sense. With his cursed energy manipulation, physical aptitude, and decently powerful technique, Nanami was able to become a respectable grade 1 sorcerer, but not much more. This can be attributed in part to the limits of his curse technique and talent. In chapter 12, Gojo actually laid out pretty clearly that a sorcerer's capabilities are made up primarily of innate ability, with only a small portion being your own skill and dedication. Simply put, this means that a large majority of characters in Jujutsu Kaisen can never become as strong or competent as Gojo, Sukuna, Yuta, Geto, or any other characters that lie beyond the normal conventions of strength. And while the ratio technique certainly doesn't help Nanami with the goal to become an elite sorcerer, more than innate talent, what limited Nanami was his mentality. Much like Megumi in the beginning of the series, Nanami loses out on achieving his true potential because of how poorly optimized his mindset is for sorcery. Gojo and Sukuna, the strongest characters in the verse, have both on numerous occasions mentioned how important it is to have a strong sense of desire and ego to become powerful. Gojo and Sukuna have both literally been referred to as honored ones who stand at the pinnacle of existence in their verse, and both characters have made it clear in discussion with others that it is through that mentality that they became calamities that can destroy everything and everyone around them at a moment's notice. So in order to achieve his full potential, just like I did with Geto in the past, I will be plugging my controller into Nanami and making some changes to the character, with the first being a sharp change in mindset. I'll talk about his technique and the potential for high-level sorcery later in this video, but for a more average character like Nanami, a change of mentality is the first step for growth. Rather than be complacent with his rank as grade 1 and lack the resolve to dedicate himself to becoming stronger, this full potential Nanami would be absolutely obsessed with growth and strength in order to protect young Jujutsu sorcerers. Now, this change in mindset is all well and good, and it would prime Nanami to get stronger, but there does need to be some sort of practical way to actually make him a better sorcerer if we want to see some real significant growth. And the first thing I'd have him do is learn to cast a simple domain. For a sorcerer of Nanami's caliber, it's very possible that a domain expansion is simply too much to ask of him, and in the event that it is, Nanami still needs to find a way to protect himself from cursed spirits or sorcerers who are able to achieve that peak, and a simple domain is the best way to do this. As the name implies, simple domains are much easier to obtain than full-blown domain expansions. They don't give the statistical and sure hit advantage that a full domain can create. However, even in the simplest of examples, they can allow you to ward off domain expansions and remain physically safe. It's not the most broken ability in the verse by any means, but there are plenty of characters who have shown how useful they can be in a pinch. You also can't really disqualify Nanami from being able to use this technique either, because while he may need a teacher and someone to instruct him, the actual level of sorcerer it takes to acquire this ability is relatively low. Low-grade students, characters with no curse technique, and fellow grade 1 level combatants have all shown the capacity to learn this. All that would be required is the drive to go search for someone who knows. Now, one problem that could potentially arise is a lack of knowledge on Nanami's part, although I would argue that he should know that Kusakabe Kusakabe is aware of how to use a simple domain. But in the event that he doesn't, I'm sure that a respectable, high-level sorcerer like himself could pull the right strings to find out. And in the absolute worst case scenario, he could ask Gojo directly to point him in the right direction to someone who can teach him. I say worst case scenario because, as you can tell from all of their interactions, Nanami doesn't really rock with Gojo like that. Now, learning simple domain, at least in the most basic form, is just the first step. You see, proficiency with simple domains can get so crazy that they allow sorcerers without innate techniques to become grade 1s. Kusakabe is an amazing example of that, as he is the only character to officially achieve grade 1 status without the assistance of a curse technique, and the only other character to reach that level in an unofficial sense is Yuji, a young sorcerer with enough potential to surpass Gojo, and one granted a physical body that is much closer to a heavenly restriction than it is to a normal human being. This means that through cursed energy manipulation in simple domains alone, Kusakabe was able to achieve a level of strength that is comparable, if not greater than Nanami's. Imagine you add all of Kusakabe's skill and dedication to the simple domain craft onto the pre-existing abilities of Nanami. With this, you would result in a pretty strong sorcerer and one who would be much more versatile in certain scenarios. Sure, this alone might not be quite enough to make him a top tier in the verse, but the many styles of simple domain quick drawing that Kusakabe uses could be very helpful to the overall combat ability of a weapon user like Nanami. Normally, he wouldn't be the kind of guy to ask to train with another sorcerer in this capacity, but if I have the controls, if I'm the one making the decisions, Nanami's doing anything that is absolutely necessary to pick up on the skills that Kusakabe possesses. Now, anime-onlys haven't quite seen it yet, but manga readers definitely know why this is such a valuable thing to add to his arsenal, as with just the quick draw and simple domain added to his toolkit, Nanami's offensive and defensive abilities would improve exponentially. And to push him even further into the heights of sorcery, I would have Nanami train his curse energy manipulation and physical abilities from the ground up. Just like Mei, he would push himself to the absolute limits of the human body and try to go further still, all in the hopes of becoming just a bit stronger. Now, all of the things that I've laid out in this video so far may seem very simple or relatively basic things to add to Nanami's arsenal relative to other characters I have speculated on in the series, and truth be told, they are. So far, all I've done for Nanami is improve his physical stats by a decent margin and give him the ability to cast simple domains in various ways, but this alone would completely change his utility as a sorcerer. The character who was at the mercy of cursed spirits the moment a domain expansion was opened would no longer exist. The Nanami that was caught in Maito's domain expansion would be able to continue fighting with resolve through the use of a simple domain. His ability to fight cursed spirits outside of a domain would also increase, as his hypothetical version of Nanami would be faster, stronger, more durable, and have more moves in his arsenal that he could use than he ever had in the canon. Realistically speaking, this Nanami would go from being the baseline of a grade 1 to one of the stronger sorcerers to officially hold that rank within Jujutsu society. But is this all that he could do? Well, up to this point in the video, I definitely have been operating within reasonable and conservative parameters for Nanami's potential. When I make these videos, my goal is to really simulate what a character can/could have been if whatever hurdles that were stopping them were removed. So when someone that is more down to earth and meant to represent the more average kind of guy in Jujutsu Kaisen, this genuinely might be where he caps out depending on your perception of him. Unlike in unique cases like Suguru Geto, a high-level special grade, Nanami's upper limits don't make themselves as easily known. So I haven't really dive too far off the deep end into speculation on his curse technique, potential domains, RCT, etc, 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 because it is a very real possibility that Nanami wouldn't be able to achieve this even with the right mindset. But what are these videos for if not to really stretch our imagination and have some fun? So in this next segment, let's push this a bit further and discuss what Nanami could do with the benefit of the doubt. Whenever talking about potential, the first thing that pops into the minds of many JJK fans are domain expansions, and that makes sense. Domains are established pretty early on to be the pinnacle of sorcery, and as such, it's kind of the end-all be-all in the minds of many fans of the series. In giving access to this same level of ability, I think we could really help him grow and have him access a whole new dimension of strength. A lot of my domain expansion speculations will contain very minor spoilers for the manga, so if you don't want to see that in any capacity, you can skip to this time code. When it comes to giving Nanami a domain expansion, I am much more in favor of giving him a rule-based domain rather than one that is imbued with a sure hit technique. And the reason for this is rather simple. This form of domain aligns with Nanami's character the most in just about every facet. It requires less skill, talent and potential than a sure hit, as Tengen has said, so we aren't straying too far from Nanami's ethos, and it also complements his technique and fighting style a bit more, rather than have him just ratio every character that falls into his domain. As for the name of the domain itself, you could call it something like Golden Ratio. The inside of the domain would be very akin to a massive office space, clearly playing into Nanami's worker aesthetic and technique, and within the domain, the general idea that I've come up with is one that takes quite a bit of inspiration from Hikari and his own domain. Inside Golden Ratio, there would be a massive clock ticking, and with every 30 seconds that passes in real time, the hour hand within the domain would tick once, and after 8 domain hours pass, Nanami would be able to tap into double time, the enhanced version of overtime. This essentially means that after 4 minutes, Nanami gets a massive power up. And rather than increase his cursed energy all the way up to 120% as the standard overtime amp does, when combining the stat amp from the domain with the boost from double time, his cursed energy levels would shoot all the way up to 200% of their normal capacity, with the combined effect of every part of his opponent's body being considered a weak point. So rather than have to align his blade with any specific joint or ratio or point, the entire body itself is considered weakened for Nanami to strike with his full power. This means in a vacuum he hits harder, but he's also weakening the opponent to make those hits even more devastating. If he's able to trap you within his domain and keep you there for 4 minutes in real time, Nanami's defensive and attacking options reach some ridiculous levels, as he'd be able to reinforce and output some very powerful amounts of cursed energy. Now, if you're familiar with the manga, I'm sure you see the very obvious Hikari inspiration here with the general idea and execution of the rule-based abilities, and even down to the time frame. But I also feel that the name of the domain, added cursed energy based on a time frame, and upgraded ratio technique all do remain somewhere within the realm of being Nanami-like. Double time just being the real-life exaggeration of overtime, giving him a significant boost in cursed energy, makes quite a bit of sense, and golden ratio, I mean, yeah, you could call me a genius for that one, I know. It's certainly not the easiest thing in the world to come up with a viable domain for a technique that is as straightforward and seemingly simple as his, but I do think that I was able to come up with a pretty fun and balanced domain while also giving him a pretty massive advantage in combat. This rule-based risk-reward style of domain balances his talent, his fighting style, and his mindset in a way that I think really works for this very hypothetical what-if version of Nanami. Now, even when being generous to argue for him having a domain expansion though, I really don't think that the likes of RCT would be something that Nanami would ever get access to. The amount of confirmed characters who have the ability to heal themselves and others is actually lower than those who have domain expansions, and if even Gojo can't use it to its fullest extent, it's safe to say that Nanami never would be able to either. Regardless of this, it's been made pretty clear just how powerful Nanami could have become if he was able to overcome his self-doubt and mental barriers. Even barring the domain expansion, he could rise through the ranks and be an elite level fighter that would be relevant even in the context of battles in the manga. If you granted him the domain expansion that I mentioned in this video, Nanami would be able to go from one of the weakest grade 1s in the series to arguably one of the strongest, continuously being a relevant force within the series. With his innate technique, dedication to cursed energy manipulation and physical strength, simple domains, quick draw techniques, and rule-based domain expansion, Kento Nanami could have become a real force to be reckoned with. Let me know how strong you think a full potential Nanami could get down in the comment section below, and tell me if you think he had enough potential for a domain expansion. I'm very curious to see if you agree with my assessment. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe, hit the bell, and check out the other videos in the series where I hypothesize how strong a character could be with their talent completely unleashed. I'm really having fun with this series, and will keep putting out these videos so long as you guys keep having fun with them. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.